All right, joining me now from Nairobi, Kenya is Nicodemus Minde. He's a researcher with the Institute for Security Studies. Thank you so much for being here with us. Really appreciate it. Good to see you again. So, Uganda has already nearly 2 million refugees. Why do you think President Museveni agreed to take in even more people from the U.S.?
I think the deal, of course, there is no clear conditions that have been outlined, and especially what Uganda stands to benefit. But all that we are doing now is speculation. But one of the biggest speculation is Uganda intends to improve its relations with Washington after previous stint of sanctions. So the aim here is to, of course, improve the relations between Uganda and the United States. And of course, there are also speculations that the deal could encompass other financial incentives as well as visa, as well as tariff benefits that will come from this particular deal.
So there's some sort of quid pro quo, but we just don't know exactly what the terms are, I guess. There's an election upcoming in Uganda. I mean, how do ordinary Ugandans feel about all of this?
Well, one of the issues that has also come out is the fact that this particular agreement or deal has not passed through Parliament. And of course, there's been some form of criticism that has come from the opposition, who view that the deal ought to have been passed through Uganda's parliament for approval. So if you are to gauge probably that in terms of what the Ugandan people particularly feel, we may not know exactly, but I think there is, of course, some form of disagreement as to why this deal did not pass through parliament for discussion and approval. So you can say that there's some form of public disagreement of some kind because the deal did not pass through, was not discussed through official channels.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about in Uganda, one of the world's poorest countries. Now, we don't know the number of migrants that they'll be taking in, so we don't know the true cost of what it would cost Uganda. But surely that's a consideration too. I imagine people aren't exactly thrilled about that.
Exactly. One of the agreement or the deal is still very fuzzy. So yes, you have highlighted the three conditions, which include no criminal record or not accompanied by minors, and of course, preferably from African countries. But one of the things that is not coming out very clear is the timelines in which this deal is going to start. Of course, the Ugandan officials have actually said that it is a temporal agreement, but again, in terms of the benefits, clear benefits, it's still very fuzzy. It's still subject to speculation. And again, there's of course the question that that Uganda is going into an election in January 2026, and of course there is belief that by Ugandan agreeing to such a deal, it could be a way that the administration there are trying to shield itself from criticisms once the elections start, the electoral process, of which most of the time the electoral process has oftentimes been very, very, authoritarian, and issues with human rights have also been of high concern in Uganda.
Let's widen this out, take a more continental view. I mean, it's not just Uganda here. A couple of other African countries have already taken in U.S. deportees. Rwanda has just agreed to do it the other day. There seems to be a certain amount of anger about the continent becoming, a dumping ground for America's unwanted migrants, especially as we've talked about, since we don't know, in most cases, what the countries are getting in return here.
For sure, other than Rwanda, the other countries, South Sudan, and of course the Swatini, and there's been a lot of concern, of course, the issue to do with the legality, of course, of the deportation, on which you have highlighted from the United States point of view, but of course, also in the larger context of international law, and of course international refugee law, and of course international human rights law. All these are subjects of concern, especially on the principle of non-refoulement, in which is an important principle in refugee law, where the deportees that you have cited the case of Brigadier Garcia. There's a concern from the United States that, for instance, maybe there is an attempt for him to take a plea, but again, from the African context, there is, of course, the fuzziness that comes with this. But of course, there's also another question of the safety of these deported immigrants who may come. Most of these countries, as you have highlighted, there's been concern about the human rights record, and of course, there's also the issue of their safety in terms of these countries, in terms of how they have operated in the previous past. So all these are criticisms that actually come with this Uganda-United States deal in the broader context. As you put it, actually rightly put it, there is the question of the perception that they are being dumped into the African continent.
Last question for you, a very general one. Curious to get your perspective there from Nairobi. Take the temperature for me on Donald Trump's relationship with the continent so far. How is his second term being viewed so far?
Well, if you're to look at his first stint as president, he didn't go very well with the African continent. Of course, there were those very harsh words that were said against the continent. And of course, this has come also with big tariffs that have been announced that have hit the continent hard. And we've also seen the treatment, of course, of the South African head of state while he was on visit to the White House in general. So you can understand that there is not so a very good relationship between, for example, the United States, how Africa views Donald Trump in the larger context. But again, these are just very personal views, might not necessarily project what Americans actually view Donald Trump.
Yeah, a very large continent with so many different views, but appreciate getting yours on this. Nicodemus Minde in Nairobi. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.